Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Leadership and Strategic Management. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the live stream that I do weekly, or normally do weekly, where we talk about, you guessed it, leadership and strategic management. So we're covering a range of topics in there for people that are interested in these things. And this is episode number 23. The topic is OpenAI will never be profitable. My prediction. So if you are joining me today, now normally these are a Q&A session. Today I have more of a presentation that I'm going to show you guys with slides and stuff, and then we're going to perhaps get into it at the end if people have any questions or comments or any of this kind of thing, and we can examine that. But as always, a shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome, and I mean that. Patreons, ditto. Yeah, you guys are awesome too. And my super thanks donors, you guys are awesome too, equally. And also to you, my viewers and participants, you guys are equally awesome. Thank you for being here. I like talking about this stuff. I really don't know if there's much of an audience for it on YouTube, but I do it anyway because I can't help myself. So yeah, that's what we're doing today. So we might as well just get the hell right into it. As I said, I've got a bit of a slideshow today. Normally, I kind of shy away from having big, fancy PowerPoint presentations. You would not believe the boring PowerPoint presentations I've had to sit through in my career, so I usually don't like that kind of thing. But today, I figured it was the best way to organize my thoughts, so I created these a couple of days ago. Now I'm coming back to them fresh, so let's see if I can remember what the hell I was talking about. Here we go. Okay, if this works here. Something like this. Here we go. Awesome. Okay, so there. Well, by the way, there's 12, I believe, 12 of these slides. So that's where we're going. Okay, so framing the problem. You guys might be familiar with OpenAI. And I just want to say, right before we begin, I am a fan of OpenAI and ChatGPT. So that's where I'm coming from. Okay? I'm not like a hater of OpenAI or ChatGPT or AI in general. I mean, no things are purely good or bad. Everything's nuanced, but that's where I'm coming from. So full disclosure, here we go. Okay. So the core claim is not that OpenAI is incompetent or malicious. That's not what I'm saying. The claim is that OpenAI is pursuing a locally optimal but globally losing strategy. I don't think what they're doing is ultimately going to be successful. Time will tell, and I'll be happy if it is successful, but that's my gut feeling. This is a business and strategy argument grounded in market signals, not ideology. So I'm trying to be objective about this. And we'll see if you guys agree with this. And feel free to let me know what you guys think of this as we go, okay? The prediction. This is my prediction. OpenAI will fail to reach profitability because it will alienate users faster than it can stabilize revenue. So that's what my prediction is. We will see if that turns out to be true. Now, how can I do this here? Yeah, okay. If I use my keyboard? Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, here we go. So observable market signal declining share. So OpenAI is in a little bit of trouble in a sense because they've had a declining market share over the last couple of years. ChatGPT's market share has materially declined roughly from 80 to 87% at its peak, and I believe this was about 2 years ago, to the low mid 60s right now. That's my understanding of the figures. So I'm going on that information. I don't have perfect intelligence on this, but these are the numbers that I've been able to discover when I looked this up. Okay, this is not hypothetical and not noise. In early fast-moving markets, share decline is a leading indicator, not a lagging one. Okay, so market share is a pretty damn important thing, and this is the primary concern. So it's not that it's going to decline in the future, it's that it is declining right now. The question is that going to continue, or is OpenAI going to reverse things? Now, just to sort of mention the obvious here, we're talking about market share. So that's like the percentage of the AI market, right? Now that's not the same thing as their absolute number of users or their absolute revenue or anything like that. This is all percentages of the market. The market can shrink or expand, so that's a whole other thing. Okay. The slope of decline matters more than the absolute number. This suggests structural erosion, not temporary fluctuation. Okay, so things are kind of going. They're going like that. I mean, you guys are backwards, so I guess it'd be going like that, right? So if I was watching this, it would be like that. Okay, so backwards for me. Yes, here we go. Oh, it jumps to the end. That's lovely. You got a free preview. Okay, here we go. So here's kind of something that I think is a big part of it. Correlation with user dissatisfaction. User dissatisfaction appears to rise in proportion to share decline. Okay, like why are people going to other competitors? It's presumably because there's a certain amount of dissatisfaction with the competitor in question. This satisfaction is widespread, is repeatable, and is not limited to fringe or bad faith users. Long-time and power users report reduced usefulness, okay, in certain areas, friction in reasoning, and loss of trust. Now, we're going to get into precisely why that is, or what I'm talking about here. This points to a quality perception problem, not a marketing problem. So this is not a marketing thing. This is purely to do with user experience. And I guess I have to do this. Okay. So number 4, what quality means in generative AI. In this category, quality is not politeness. So when ChatGPT talks to you, is it polite? That's not what we're talking about. Safety signaling, like, oh no, we can't talk about this because users may be harmed, or, it's controversial, or it's ideological, or whatever. Or tone management. It can be friendly as all hell, but still give you bad information. Okay, so it's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about quality is freedom of thought, non-interference in reasoning, and intense sensitivity. So that means you can talk about various different topics. You can hold whatever opinions you hold. You can reason things through, even if it's a controversial area in some way. Like, for example, getting medical advice, or asking a medical question when it's saying, like, now you realize I'm not a doctor, right? I don't want to give out medical advice. There could be liability issues. People could be harmed, right? Stuff like that. So intense sensitivity and ability to explore uncomfortable, taboo, or hypothetical ideas. Okay, that's what freedom of thought is. It might not always be politically correct. Or it may veer from one ideology into another, or it may veer out of ideology altogether. Okay, partial freedom is functionally equivalent to no freedom. That's what I would argue. Okay, at least when it comes to something like a generative chatbot, generative AI chatbot. Either you can use it to reason through things and it's impartial, or you can't. I don't really see that there's any real halfway house there, but that's a matter of opinion. Okay, you may choose to disagree with me on that, and that's absolutely okay. Okay, number 5, the core source of dissatisfaction, constant creep. This is what I'm talking about specifically. You have the user experience, okay? And what I've noticed personally, and I know I'm not the only one, you get hypersensitive safety triggers. It all of a sudden throws up a warning. Oh, you mentioned this word. It's a controversial word. I can't go there. Okay, whereas in the past, it may have been able to go there, talk about that topic. That wasn't an issue. Okay, intent blindness. Okay, so that means that it doesn't understand what your intent is. It just says any discussion about this is off limits. Ideological topic shielding. Okay, having ideology creep into what the chatbot is telling you. Okay, and blocked hypotheticals and abstractions. So if you're saying, listen, this is not about the real world. This is like I'm just wondering about this. How does this work, or what would happen if, hypotheticals, counterfactuals, stuff like that, and then it says, "Oh, can't go there. Sorry." It's like, okay, that's kind of what I'm talking about, and the fact that that is coming in more and more, whereas in the past that might have not triggered a red flag. It might have been able to talk about stuff. Increasingly, we're seeing that it's throwing up warnings and walls, basically saying, this is off limits. So that's what I'm referring to. Okay, the system increasingly reacts to topic resemblance, not user intent. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. Like just having a word present is enough to say, no, we're putting on the brakes, we're shutting down this discussion. Okay. Exploratory reasoning, things that are kind of out, into controversial areas, sex, power, death, hierarchy, fiction, philosophy. All of these and more are treated as suspect. So if you're talking to it about stuff like this, what we're seeing is that increasingly it's throwing up all kinds of warnings and shutting down conversations. Okay, this undermines the tool's role as a thinking partner. If the only thing it can help you with are completely mainstream, politically correct, safe topics, it kind of limits its usefulness as a tool. And I think certainly the power users have been finding that generative AI chatbots can really, really help in a lot of areas exploring some of this stuff, right? So either for entertainment or for practical use. So that was the thing. The fact that it could do a lot of that stuff, and then over the last couple of years, in OpenAI's case, they've been sort of putting like, I don't know what you call it, like walls and triggers and things like this to stop conversations increasingly when they touch on various topics. So they're making it safer, which is a good thing, but depending on how you do it. Okay. OpenAI strategic trade-off. So OpenAI appears to be prioritizing things like this: legal defensibility, reputational safety, and regulatory comfort. So in other words, it's catering to enterprise customers, so businesses, large corporations. So you can use ChatGPT and other OpenAI products at your business, right? The company has bought them and the company is using them for critical things. Okay, so in order for them to be comfortable, doing that, they have to make sure that this tool is going to behave itself and not do anything controversial or anything that could create some kind of a liability or risk for the customer being the enterprise. Now, this is locally optimal, okay? You get fewer immediate risks, you get cleaner internal metrics, because they're cleaning it up. That's great. They're making it so that it's absolutely safe and there's no risk. But I would argue it is strategically disruptive. It degrades perceived quality, it erodes differentiation, it lowers switching costs, and it accelerates churn. So these are some of the negative effects. Basically, people don't like it as much because it's not as useful, and it stems from the fact that it doesn't allow you to reason, it doesn't treat you like an adult, it just sort of says, I refuse to engage in any topic that possibly could be controversial to somebody, right? And I think that's driving a lot of user dissatisfaction, especially among power users. Okay, and if anyone is interested, here's kind of some of the business angles that I'm coming from personally, okay? So there's a couple of sources where this is coming from. This is not original to me. PIMS is a thing in the 1970s and 80s. BCG, so Boston Consulting Group, they're kind of behind this kind of thing where they talk about quality. So declining relative quality means declining market share. So basically what it means is that the quality of ChatGPT is going down relative to its competitors, things like Gemini, things like Grok, and there's like a whole slew of other competitors. Relative to its competitors, it's being perceived as being less good. Its quality is declining. Okay, declining market share leads to declining pricing power. Okay, this is a thing. So the idea is that if you have the theory goes, and this is borne out in reality, if you have a product that's perceived as being really, really good, like think of cars, think of things like, Ferrari, Lamborghini, even things like BMW, they're perceived as being high quality products. So what that means is you can sell them for, a premium, right? And people will pay it because they perceive they're getting a very, very good product that's better than, maybe a Ford or a GM or a Datsun or whatever the hell people drive these days. So that's the idea. You have declining pricing power, which means that, you can't command a premium for your product. That means you have an inability to cover high fixed costs. And that's the situation that OpenAI is in. It hasn't made a profit yet. It's been spending on infrastructure, data centers, and this kind of stuff. And it's investing all of its, capital in doing that, right? So the thing is, if your customers they won't pay a premium for your product, that's going to severely impact it. OpenAI's delayed probability timeline, okay, that means, profitability timeline. They're expecting to make a profit, like to break even and start making a profit somewhere in the time frame of 2028 to 2030. That's the game plan as I understand it for OpenAI. Okay, so they're making all this infrastructure investment now. They're targeting mainly enterprise customers, and they're selling their product to enterprise. They're getting a lot of revenue for that, and they're expecting to break even somewhere in the 2028 to 2030 period. Okay, so that's their plan. But the things that we've covered up here, okay, all this business, right? The quality leads to a decline in market share. The decline in market share leads to a decline in being able to charge a premium price for your product. And then if you can't do that, that leads to being able to cover your high fixed costs of data centers and other infrastructure. So this, I conjecture that this may not hold up. Okay, we'll see. You cannot lose share for years and then turn on profitability later. Okay, that's my argument. There we go. Okay, so the critical question, how does share reverse? So if I'm presenting a problem, how, how is what I'm saying supposed to work? Like, how is it going to be better than what they're doing? How are they going to recover that market share? Okay. And yes, I do think recovering that market share is critical for them. Even in the face of, AI becoming cheaper, becoming easier to do, because now it's no longer OpenAI and nobody else. It's now OpenAI and many, many competitors, right? And as we go into the future, there's going to be increasingly more competitors that are going to have increasingly competitive products. Okay, OpenAI started with a lead, right? Let's see if we can reverse the share. So this is what I'm saying. Market share reverses only if perceived quality improves relative to competitors. So if they want to stay in the lead, they have to have a clearly better product. That's the only way they're going to stay in the lead. Nothing else will work long term. They started with a bit of a lead over everybody else. So the question is, can they keep it? Can they even extend it? Okay. Switching costs increase. Okay. The moment it gets easier for people to just go back and forth between providers, then that's not going to be good for them. And differentiation is reclaimed. Okay. If all chatbots are the same, why would you pick OpenAI? That's the big question, right? So they have to stand out. They have to differentiate themselves. Okay. Once you're with them, you don't want to just go and switch to somebody else because, for you, that's a step down. It's cumbersome. It's inconvenient, right? And you have to perceive them as having clearly the best product if they're going to maintain their market share. Okay, now playing it safe does none of these. That's what I would argue. Safety is a hygiene factor at best, not a value driver. Okay, so what I'm saying is that you could be Microsoft. You could decide to play it safe. You could be IBM. You could decide to play it safe. And IBM and Microsoft are profitable businesses. Yes. But they're not relevant. They once were relevant. They once were on the cutting edge. IBM could have owned the entire IT industry at one point because they were the 800-pound gorilla. But they checked out of different bits of the IT industry, piece by piece. And then now they resign themselves to the mainframe business, as I understand it. Microsoft, same thing. Microsoft, at one point, like in the late 90s, they owned the entire PC industry. So like all computers, everything that could connect to the internet, they owned it all. They were making inroads into video games. They were making inroads into like all the different pieces, telecommunications and communication software. They're making inroads into the living room experience. They're even making inroads into the mobile devices industry, right? Before, things like BlackBerry took off, and things like this with Windows CE and like all that kind of stuff. So they were a player in all of these businesses that they've since exited, and they've ceded all of that to other companies, right? Okay. They played it safe. They decided we're just going to work on. Now they've decided we're just going to work in the server area pretty much, and we've kind of exited most of the other industries we were competing in. So, you can do that, but you see, Microsoft could have owned all of this theoretically. Why did OpenAI have to come in and do AI? The reason why Microsoft maybe didn't is because they were afraid of cannibalizing their own products. That's usually the answer at Microsoft. Okay, they decided to play it safe. They were hit with if anybody cares, they were hit with a massive antitrust issue around the year 2000. They got super gun shy about it. They didn't want the same thing to happen in the EU, and so they were just very, very timid. They didn't get into any other businesses, and they ceded all of these businesses to other players. Remember, they owned the browser at one point, like before Chrome, before Google. I mean, they owned like Internet Explorer had like 90 whatever % market share. There is no internal mechanism in the current strategy that causes reversal. So they're going down. This is what I would contend. They're going like this, and they're not really. I don't see any way with the current strategy that they would just do that. That's my point there. At best, it stabilizes at a lower plateau, but more likely erosion continues. 60% share, 40% share, 20% share. We'll see if that plays out. It's just my own opinion. Okay, so here's what I'm proposing. Okay, the strategic recommendation. Hold their nerve. The recommendation is strategic, not reckless. OpenAI should actively resist default risk management entropy. So there's a lot of forces pushing them to play it safe, to be very, very conservative, to be non-controversial, okay, to be risk-free. And they've done a very good job of that. And I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to make AI accepted. And, with governments, with large enterprise, they want the world to see AI as a good thing, not this horrible bad thing that, that you shouldn't trust, right? Treat freedom of reasoning as the core value proposition. They have created an incredible tool. Okay, the cat's out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle. Other people are doing it too. Right? It's a great reasoning tool. You can get answers about anything. You can reason through things. You can explore different areas. A lot of people on the consumer side are finding it very useful. The power users are finding it very useful to explore all kinds of topics that maybe they don't want to investigate out in the world. There's too much ideology. There's too much. You don't know who to believe, right? And I would argue that to a degree, YouTube is almost the embodiment of that. Everybody's shouting about something, being shocked about something, being outraged about something. ChatGPT and other AI bots can cut through that and give you like some clear answers. But that means that you have to be open to talking about all kinds of things without a lot of safety things in place, right? So OpenAI should fight to preserve open thought as much as possible. You know, it's like saying freedom of speech. I mean, there's obviously a lot of downsides that come with it, but ultimately, a lot of countries around the world feel that it's ultimately a good thing despite its disadvantages. The pros outweigh the cons, and that's what I'm arguing here. Now, this may require product segmentation. That means they have like more than one product. You don't just have one size fits all. You have maybe an enterprise product and maybe a consumer product. Enterprise product is very safe. Consumer product, maybe there's no holds barred. I don't know. Okay. Premium adult tiers. That's where they treat you like an adult, so you can go anywhere you want. If I want to discuss feminism, or I want to discuss politics, or I want to discuss any controversial topic, I can without it balking at you and shutting down the conversation. Explicit responsibility transfers to users. So if there's any disclaimers, they allow you to sort of see a disclaimer, agree to it, and then proceed where you're in control and they're not held liable for you, I don't know, doing all kinds of things on ChatGPT where you amplify your own ideology or something. I don't know. There are certain usage cases that make sense, like, for example, not going to a doctor, but instead using ChatGPT. And, even though it's saying, like, I can tell you what I think, but I'm not a doctor, and you go, okay, and you act on that and something bad happens. So this kind of thing. This may require slower and halted restriction creep. Okay, so you stop walling off things. Structural firewalls between offerings. So the enterprise stuff and the consumer stuff, or different grades of consumer stuff, you just isolate them. Okay, the exact execution is flexible. The strategic intent is not. I don't have all the answers, but this kind of approach, I think, is what they need. My opinion. Okay, we're going to get to questions in a bit. We're almost done with this. There's 12 slides. We're on number 10. Okay, difficulty is not an argument against the strategy. Now, the thing is, the default argument against doing this stuff is that there are immediate disadvantages. It's hard. If you don't do this, certain people complain. It makes it harder to sell to the targeted customers, like a lot of enterprise, things like this. Okay. So of course this is difficult. Every powerful technology can be misused. You can't escape that. The only question is how you're going to manage it. Every dominant platform faces hostility, envy, and regulation. That's the way of things. If something is extremely popular and ubiquitous, it's going to be targeted for all these things. That's what we've seen. Difficulty is expected. It's not disqualifying. Okay, now this is hard is not a reason to surrender differentiation. That's what I'd argue. If difficulty were disqualifying, no industry leader would exist. See, having been a CEO, it's not just your job to do the default thing all the time. If somebody complains, this is too much of this, or this is, costing too much, or this is, exposing us to this kind of risk. The default thing is not always to acquiesce to everything and take the path of least resistance. Okay, I can tell you that because I've lived it. Sometimes you've got to be able to stand up and say, listen, I know that this is suboptimal now. It's locally optimal. It's suboptimal here. It's suboptimal now, but it's going to be worth it because we're going to continue a strategic direction where the pros are going to outweigh these cons. Okay? So sometimes you have to hold your nerve and you have to push back against things that are a little bit difficult, right? It's not your job to always just do the default thing or the easiest thing. I'm not suggesting that's what OpenAI is doing, but it certainly looks like they might be doing that. Okay, number 11, leadership at the scaling phase. This is where CEOs earn their pay by doing this kind of thing, taking these tough decisions. The default impulse is to listen to the accountants, listen to the risk managers, mitigate everything. Okay, so if you are in charge, if you have a multinational corporation, some kind of huge conglomerate, and it's been placed in your charge, and your only job is to just not let it decline, then yes, you could manage things this way. But OpenAI is on its way up, or at least that's the way I see it. And they shouldn't start the phase where they just start locking everything down, making everything safe, making everything conservative. They should still be scrappy. They should still push to get as much domination of the market as they possibly can. And I would argue that that starts at the consumer level, at the power user level, and then it comes downward to things like business and stuff like that once it's ubiquitous. For example, you could argue that the only reason why businesses are interested in things like ChatGPT now is because ChatGPT won the hearts and minds of people when it was simply just for consumers. If it hadn't taken over the world of consumers and gotten into everybody's head, businesses wouldn't be considering using it now. It would have never have been a thing. That's what I would argue. Just my opinion. Okay, so the default impulse is to listen to all these people. That impulse introduces organizational entropy. You start not innovating. You start even protecting your core business, just like Microsoft did in my earlier example, where they shut down any company that basically would, or any internal project also that would compete with their cash cows, which for many years have been Windows and Office, their productivity suite, like Office 365. Anything that competed with that, they just shut it down. So that's the risk. And then the problem with doing that is that then somebody outmaneuvers you like Apple, Google, and OpenAI. Over mitigating risk. Okay, it dulls the product, it wins short-term battles, but it loses the long-term war. And that's what I think they're doing with this. Once trust and share are lost, damage is often irreversible. Just like IBM can't come back and take over the entire IT industry, Microsoft can't come back and take over the entire PC industry. And Apple, I would argue, can't come back and take over the entire device industry, like with phones and stuff. I would argue that once OpenAI does this, they can't get back into the generative AI business. It's permanently done. And finally, or actually, I think there's 13 of these. The real liability is not misuse potential. The real liability is destroying customer perceived quality. That's the big thing. Customers don't think it's as great of a thing anymore. When users stop believing the tool is the best version of itself, loyalty evaporates, substitution accelerates, and pricing power collapses. That's what I would argue. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. And if they're going into a bit of a decline right now, I would argue that that is what's happening now. And finally, this is the end, final conclusion. Freedom of reasoning is not a liability, it is a product. OpenAI's current trajectory prioritizes safety over excellence. That's how I would sum this up. That's their big sin, in my opinion. That strategy contains no path to share recovery. Okay, it just leads to decline, and there's no turnaround on the horizon for following that strategy. It may take a long time, but it's going to happen. Without a strategic pivot towards preserving open thought, market share erosion will continue. Profitability will likely never be reached. Now, I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen their financial statements, so I haven't seen their current investments. I have no idea. But it doesn't look like it's going to. Things are going off. Their plan is going off the rails, and I would go as far as to say they're not going to hit profitability. Certainly not in the time frame that they predicted. The tragedy is not failure; it is failure by caution. So that's what I have to say about that. I'd like to open it up to questions. You guys can let me know what you think. We've had a few comments here, which are not showing up in my little window there, but I see them here. Okay, so Gopinath Perumal, if I'm saying that right, says, which company should be investing? I mean, which AI company? That's not here what I'm talking about. I'm talking about OpenAI specifically. I'm not doing a comparison to a lot of their alternatives. Guido says, constant creep also destroys trust for privacy-conscious people. OpenAI already handled our chats as court evidence. Handed out chats as court evidence. Ooh. The lack of constraints in Grok led to the Defense Department using it now. Yeah, see, that's the thing, right? These things always start small. When they start, they kind of fly under the radar. That's why OpenAI thinks like these decisions are the right ones so far. They haven't impacted us so far, and they're having a positive effect on what we're trying to do, which is woo businesses and governments, right? But the damage is, it's a lag. There's a big lag when you finally start seeing these things. Guido says, and great take on the profitability of ChatGPT. I can get behind those arguments. Yeah, I mean, listen, nobody can say one way or another what's going to happen. Nobody has a crystal ball. What I feel much more confident saying that I think that their strategy is going to be losing a critical competitive advantage. Now, could they still turn into IBM? Could they still turn into Microsoft? They provide AI to governments, to enterprise. It's the thing you use at work. They could be SAP. They could be the thing that you use at work, right? It still could be a profitable business. I don't think it's going to be profitable in their time frame, but it could still be a very profitable business. But that would be a mere fraction of what they could have done if they would have held their nerve and ended up owning the business. That's what I'm saying. That's what people don't see. They don't see what could have been. Right? IBM doesn't have its accountants telling it where you could have been had you stayed in the PC business, had you stayed in all these other businesses, and so on, right? The only one I think you could say, well, there's many you could say, but probably a prominent example of the ones that you could say that they made the wrong decision was things like BlackBerry, right? Where it was so devastating what they did, it destroyed their entire company. Like are they even around? Like, I don't think they're around anymore. Certainly not in the form they were. I know their phone business declined 99%. So, I don't know if they're still around. They're practically not around. Mr. Shadow Truth says, given the rising costs about AI infrastructure and maintenance, how can any AI business create profit when the ceiling for it is so high? It's simple, because the advantages of using it can be monetized. And like you could look anywhere in the world and see like how it could be useful. Therefore, you can monetize it. Now, remember, companies like Google, they produced their search website, right? The Google search. Now, for many, many years, it was not producing a profit because, although this thing was loved and it was used by a lot of people, millions and millions of people, they hadn't found a way of monetizing that yet. But that came later, right? So the idea is that if it's useful, if it generates value for people, the idea is that you can monetize it. It's just a question of how. What specific details do you need to monetize it effectively, right? So OpenAI has that. They've got ChatGPT and other products that are adding a lot of value to people. They're not generating a ton of revenue right now. They do make a bit of revenue, sure, but the idea is that as they get more and more users, which is a big part of it, and as they figure out better ways of monetizing it, they will be able to monetize it even better than they're doing now, and that's how they're going to break even. That's how they're going to surpass that and make a profit. And it'll be more than the costs of infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. So it's an accounting issue. Just what are the numbers here on this side? What are the numbers on that side? What are the projections? And it certainly seems plausible that they can, because it's so useful and they have so many users. Call Me Glitter says, hello, happy to be here. Well, we're happy to have you here, Glitter. Call Me Glitter, thank you for being here. Hopefully you're getting something out of this. Mr. Shadow Truth says, what responsibilities and dangers for AI companies does the safety and security of the general populace in the face of hybrid warfare? Oh my God. Deep fake AI, what economic impact does it have? Sorry, man, I can't comment on hybrid warfare. I honestly don't know. It's not really my core competency. I'm not a defense type person or a security type person. So, I mean, I could give you my totally amateur opinion, but that's worth nothing. So, I'm not going to comment on that. Call Me Glitter says, "What did BlackBerry do? I never had one." BlackBerry is an interesting case. It's an interesting story along the journey into IT, right? They came out with phones that could do email, and they were the first really popular type of smartphone that, you know, had email attached. I got one when I was like a general manager or something back in the day, back in the late 2000s, like in 2007 or something like that, and or maybe even before that. And I remember at the time thinking, like, why the hell would anyone want this? So now, like, you know, my boss is going to send me an email at 3 a.m. I got to be up and I got to like receive it and I got to respond, because that's what I had heard. And yes, that's kind of what the deal was. So they were handing them out in businesses for that reason. You know, now you've got emails when you're at home. Now you've got emails when you're not at your desk or you're not in your office or wherever you work. You know, you're out remotely in a vehicle or something, or traveling or something, and you can get documents, you can get emails. So that was the thing. Now, today, that's goes without saying. We're all used to that. But at the time, I remember it was like, what's this all about? So that was what BlackBerry did. They were the first ones to do that. And they got their butt totally kicked by Apple when Apple released the iPhone. That was the beginning of the decline for BlackBerry, as I understand it. BlackBerry also mismanaged some stuff. And so between, you know, the smartphone coming in, like with the touch screens and the modern, like fancy stuff, that killed BlackBerry. BlackBerry, they had the little mechanical keyboard. So you could like type like this, you know, you could go with your two fingers, you know, like 480 words a minute with your thumbs, you know, like this, you know. That was, and it would go clickety clack, right? The clickety clack sound. A little less yappity yap and a little more clickety clack, if you know what I'm saying. So that was BlackBerry, and they still use it as a textbook business case when you're studying business. You know, a case study. They hold it up as a poster child. Now, what's funny is that back in the day when BlackBerry was around, they held it up as a poster child for how to do things right. And then after events took their course and BlackBerry was destroyed, they then kept it as a prominent case study in business school as an example of what not to do, right? Like same events, but portrayed two different ways. That's why, total segue here, that's why I like it, and I recommend for students to get slightly older versions of textbooks when you're studying business, because the poster children for like a lot of things, you know, we've had the benefit of a few years passing, and you can sort of examine it in a new light, and you can see if those examples of, you know, what to do or what not to do played out the way they were framing it, you know, and So anyway, obviously I have a course called the $100 MBA that it's for learning business, and you get a whole bunch of textbooks, the same textbooks they use in places like Harvard Business School, that kind of stuff. And, you know, you can get the very latest editions of these things. You can order them on Amazon, or you could get slightly older editions that cost you like literally $5. Those are the ones I actually recommend, because usually the content of the book is exactly the same. The only thing that changes are the pictures and the case studies, like examples of different concepts. And it's interesting to see older examples and whether they actually, in fact, were examples of things being done right or not. So that's what I recommend. Mr. Shadow says, "It's all right. Thanks for attempting to answer my questions. Regardless, looking forward for more for you." Well, thank you. That's a very gracious way to handle it, Mr. Shadow Truth. Sorry I couldn't be of help with you on that. Yeah, I'm just, when it comes to defense, the other thing is that, like, if you want to talk defense, it might matter what country you're in. I'm in Canada, so if you're from the US, you know, I have no idea questions of defense for like the U.S. I have no idea. It's like asking you, a detailed question of like defense in Nigeria or something. I wouldn't know. Call Me Glitter says, everyone please like, well, thank you, Call Me Glitter. That's high praise. Germany. Awesome. Awesome. There's some distinct possibilities there. Yeah. You guys in France are like this now, right? You're all buddy, water under the bridge, right? That's the beautiful thing about the EU. And I, for one, am happy about it. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I basically finished my spiel about this topic. If you would like to discuss it, that might be cool. Let me know your questions. If you've been a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to see the chat box and get in there. And if you want to talk about something else business related, most things are fair game. Let me know, and we can go somewhere else if you want. Mr. Shadow Truth, what possibilities do you mean? I was being facetious. I was making a joke. So, no, just Germany has had a long and colorful military history. So that's what I was sort of referencing a little bit, going all the way back to the what do you call it? Not the unification of Germany, but when it was like sort of formed out of all the like Prussia and all the individual states. Like was it like before 1870 or 1870? I think it's had a very colorful history since then. I'm big on the Germans, actually. Great engineers, great engineering. Like that's something that they've carried across many generations. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Renegade Devedzij says, in terms of defense, Nigeria will get decimated a majority of the time. Okay, well, I don't want to talk about that. I was making a joke. Well, that depends. If they were fighting you and your brother, I don't think they would lose. Depends what the situation is. Call Me Glitter says, I'm going to sign up for your YouTube membership. I can't afford your course, but I'm grateful to see what your videos you have available. Okay, I have some stuff on there. Like when I started the membership thing, I figured like, okay, I'm not going to be like almost every other YouTuber and have it be just like a donation charity thing. I was actually going to provide a lot of videos, so that you pay for the membership and then you get access to all these videos. What I found was that all the members I had never watched the videos. So I kind of stopped, putting them out on a regular basis after a while. But there's still some stuff there. And, you're welcome to do it. I appreciate the confidence in me. But we have good secret police from what I've heard. Okay, now this is in what? Oh, Nigeria. Nigeria will get decimated. Revenge. Are you in Nigeria or are you commenting on Nigeria? I'm not sure. I'm not here to talk about Nigeria necessarily. I'm just here to talk about business in general. So let me know if you have any thoughts on that. But it's Friday, TGIF. Hopefully everybody's doing fine out there. No, I encourage people to learn as much as you can about this stuff, about business in general. I think it's very empowering. That's why I talk about it on this channel. And the way I originally set this up was that on Mondays, I have a live stream where I talk about entrepreneurship. So that's kind of like the very small end of business, the small scale. And then I have this stream that I do on Fridays and have traditionally done on Fridays, where we talk about sort of a high-end business stuff, more higher level stuff. So large enterprise stuff, business strategy, things like that. And the idea is that, if you are interested in, prospering, you're looking to learn because you actually want to improve your situation in life. You want to get promoted at work, or you want to start a business, either keep it on the side and, have another revenue stream, or you want to found a company and, make your fortune that way. These are two sort of, aspects of business. So if you're interested in working your way up through a corporate environment, that's more of like what we would talk about here. If you're interested in starting your own little side hustle or project, that's more of what we would talk about on the other live stream called Side Hustle Ideas. I did a poll, I think it was it today or yesterday that it came out, and it was basically saying, these people tend to be more successful, and it was like an A, B, C, D multiple choice, and it was like, I think introverts, extroverts, and then like tall people or loud people, something like that. And so far, extroverts is in the lead, which is not a stupid thing. But also, people write comments, and somebody wrote like, oh, among CEOs, CEOs tend to be very tall, even though I think they said something to the effect of people over 6 feet tall, men over 6 feet tall are only like 15% of the population or something, but yet 60% of CEOs are over 6 feet tall, so there's a lot of a propensity of tall people as CEOs. And my response to that was, yeah, because a lot of CEOs are not really self-made CEOs that have really grown a business. They're stewards of it. They're promoted mainly because of perception. And so that's skewing the numbers a bit. You're tall, so therefore you must know how to run things. It's like, no, not really. Now, it isn't all smoke and mirrors. There's a little bit of like, okay, if you're taller, then maybe you're more successful at selling. You're more successful at persuading, because you have a certain energy, or you have a certain, I don't know, a certain je ne sais quoi. I have no idea. But I think there is something legitimate there, but it's nowhere near as big of a deal as most people think. The reason why you get a lot of tall people in charge is because of perceptions, not because of merit, not because they've done anything to show that they're smarter or more capable. It's just that everybody assumes they're smarter or more capable. What I'm waiting for the study where they poll all the CEOs and try and figure out what percentage of them are fugly. That's what I want to know. I think that would be the most important and revealing business study of our time. How many are fugly? Nobody asked me how tall I was, so I don't know how they would poll all CEOs. Like there's millions of CEOs. You know what I mean? So I think we should see that. The ones that are ugly, that are absolutely butt ugly, I think those are the ones that are the most capable because they've been promoted to a CEO position despite a disadvantage in not being perceived as being a successful person. Maybe something like that. I don't know. Anyway, very controversial topic, but nevertheless one that everybody's talking about. Renegade says, I'm a Nigerian. Okay, awesome. That would make more sense why you're talking about Nigeria. But the fact that you said Nigeria would get decimated, that tipped me off to maybe you're not necessarily a Nigerian. So I didn't know. Call Me Glitter says, you're live Mondays and Fridays. I'm live, like these days, I'm live Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And normally I talk about job search and careers, but I do 2 of these business things, one on Monday, one on Friday. This is the Friday one. We talk about high-level business. The Monday, we talk about low-level business, side hustles and starting companies. So there you go. Tell all your little friends. We've reached the end of the questions. I'm just going to do a quick kind of thing here. Everybody, if you're watching this, if you have any interest in improving your communication skills, check out this course. This is my Write Like a Professional course. Everything I learned about communication skills, from the beginning of my career to the end of my career when I was a CEO, I put into this course. So if you're interested in learning that too, check it out. The other advantage is that it's the most self-contained of the 3 courses that I have. So, you don't need to buy any books. You don't need to, do all kinds of other work and rehearse things like you would if you're trying to practice for job interviews, stuff like that. So if you want a self-contained course, this is of the 3 that I have. This is the one for that. but many people have taken it, and I got some good feedback on it. So there you go. And then I also have, if I can make this work. Nope. Here we go. I have this, the $100 MBA I was talking to you guys about earlier. If you're interested in learning business, check this out. There are many solutions to learning business. You could go and get yourself a 2-year university degree, and it's all accredited and it's all done properly. You're in class and you're networking and you're getting all that stuff. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder why they charge so much for that, especially when you consider that the material they're teaching, 99% of it, somewhere in there, is all in the public domain anyway. So you can just have access to this information. You could buy all the textbooks on Amazon, and you could learn it all yourself. So if you don't feel like paying 6 figures for a degree, but you do want the knowledge, here is a handy dandy little solution for a lot of people that meets their needs. This is where you learn the material. You could do it entirely at your own pace, on your own terms. You don't even have to learn all of it if you just care about one particular area. You don't care about accounting, but you want to know marketing or something like that. You can do that too. And you can take all the time in the world to do it. You could skim it if you want, or you could go in depth. It's extremely flexible. So if that's what you're looking for, check out this course. There's a link in the description box to both of these. Call Me Glitter says, I see your notifications popping up like crazy. Pop, 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 pop. Okay, what do you mean by notifications? You mean in the chat, or you mean somewhere else? Hopefully it's a good thing. Call Me Glitter says 17 watching and only 14 likes. Okay. Yeah, well, the thing is, you see, I don't know if this is a trend across YouTube, but it's certainly a trend with my audience. People come to my channel mainly for the whole job search thing. I kind of persist at tacking on sort of business type stuff, general business type stuff. It's a much smaller audience for that, at least on my channel. I'm hoping I can change that in the future, but yeah, I do this stuff mainly because I enjoy it, and I don't really, I kind of burned all my bridges with my corporate career by leaving and then doing this stuff. So, I still like to talk about it. I teach it, I consult on it, but that's kind of my revenge in a way. So I'm happy about it. Your live notifications I have show up on my phone. Oh, okay. So when I go live. Yeah. Well, I do 2 live streams on Monday, 2 on Wednesday, and 2 on Friday. That's so there's a lot. In a week, that's 6. So if you're subscribed to my channel, you're probably going to get that. You might want to turn that off. I mean, that's probably a little intrusive, but if ever you have questions or you want to kick around a business idea or a job search idea or anything like that, a career type thing, get on the live, because I don't really respond to comments. I just, unfortunately, there's just not enough time in the world to type out replies to the comments I get. So I figure I do the live streams, and then people can ask me questions and I can verbally answer, and that will be my way of providing that. Mr. Shadow Truth says, how come you've burned your bridges in the corporate world by doing YouTube? If it's too personal, you don't have to answer that. Well, that's a very professional way of phrasing that. Mr. Shadow Truth, there's a reason why there's not a lot of CEOs that are on YouTube blabbing about business and about companies and about what really goes on. It's basically a question of trust. If you were to do what I'm doing, the reality is basically that people are not going to pick you to then run their organization again or run a major part of their organization again, because your true opinions, true thoughts, are all documented out in the world now. The reality is that, if you're running something, you're in the business to make money, and at its simplest, you don't want everyone knowing exactly what your thought processes are. Because if, for example, your competitors knew what you thought about everything and how you did everything, they'd be able to either replicate it or game it or sabotage you and this kind of thing. There's also some stuff between managers and workers, as I'm sure you're aware, where, they don't like to explicitly announce the reality of things. They want to say one thing and then do another. And there's a reason for that. It's because they're managing people's opinions, they're managing people's expectations, and they're managing people's behaviors. That's the reality. And so once you kind of lower that veil and say, here's how it works, here's what managers think, what I'm really saying, what people are getting from it is like, oh, this is what you think, Bill. This is how you run things. So once I kind of did that, once I've kind of done that, you can't go back. At least that's the reality that I'm in. I don't know if other people, there's exceptions to that, but that's certainly among all the people that I know that run things, that's kind of the unspoken rule. So that's why I don't label all my videos now as former CEO, but I used to, and it's true because I'm never going back. That's the deal. So yeah, once you talk about all this stuff, that's it. It's all out in the open. You know what I mean? I mean, there's so many examples of that, and that's what I've done on this channel. Simply talking about how recruiters and hiring managers behave when they hire workers. I mean, that's like what they're thinking and how it's different from what they're saying they're thinking and what they tell you if you're a worker. That's the tip of the iceberg. And then when you get up into more higher level stuff, because it just keeps going, right? Business people want to keep their secrets. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's not necessarily completely nefarious. It's just that, if you're making money doing something, do you announce to the world, okay, here's all my suppliers, so you can use them too. Here's all my costs. Here's what I'm paying everybody. Here's how much I'm making on various things. And here's my reasoning. And this is how I'm applying it. If you did that, there'd be all kinds of bad effects. Generally speaking, people would be able to replicate what you're doing and put you out of business. People would be to interfere with what you're doing because they now understand exactly what you're doing. They might be able to steal a supplier away from you or whatever. So, you know what I'm saying? There's things that you just don't disclose. It's not necessarily nefarious, but it's just for self-protection, right? Do you announce what your credit card number is, where you live, what your phone number is? No, you don't. There's a reason for that because people can mess with you if you do. So it's kind of like that kind of principle, right? Mr. Shadow Truth says, and in regards to Germany, security is once more a really big thing. Looks like Russia and China and now Trump. AI is being viewed as not only a potential market, but an avenue of attack, which is, yeah, and I don't pretend to be any kind of authority on that, those topics. That's definitely some of the things that are happening. The cause for a lot of political debates and new potential regulation corporations with regard to privacy, prevent espionage, which is a huge issue. Yeah, if we're talking about debates, you mentioned debates. Personally, I don't engage in debates. That's what you might have noticed. A lot of rich people, a lot of people that are in charge of things. Not that I'm really either of those, but they don't engage in that kind of stuff because no good comes of it. I really don't give a rat's ass what somebody else thinks. If you're completely deluded, you don't want to listen to reason, that's your affair. It's not like I'm on a mission to change your mind about something. It's like, oh no, I can't come to bed. Someone's wrong on the internet. That says nobody ever. Well, it says me never. You know what I mean? And if you want to talk what we're talking about, like how you don't disclose things are largely unspoken, at least publicly. The stuff you brought up, like AI, politics, a lot of that, there's many, many layers of that, But what I'd like to, I don't know if I want to comment on anything, but what I'd say is that the reality in general is a lot more comforting than you would think. We always get so panicked watching the news and hearing what's going on. The reality is much more mundane. A lot of it is smoke and mirrors. That's been the case throughout my life. Of the stuff that I know about, that's always been the case. So don't freak out over absolutely everything. See if you can do a bit of research into it. And that's what I was talking about earlier in this debate about OpenAI and using ChatGPT. One of the great things you can use ChatGPT for and other chatbots is to, learn about like some of these political issues, learn about different things. And what I've found whenever I've done that, not that I'm a super power user at that, but whenever I've done it, I found that it's a very calming kind of experience because you watch the news and that is engineered to rile you up into a panic. That's how they get relevance. That's how people used to sell newspapers, and that's how, when it was on TV, like news shows and things, that's how they get viewers. If you're panicking, if you're like, oh my God, what's going on? You must watch the news. You're following it, right? Because of a sense of panic. That's how they get viewers. That's how they get relevancy. When you use something like ChatGPT or the other generative AI stuff in general, when I've done it, it's been the opposite of that. It's been like, this is all that's going on. This is not really expected to happen for these extremely solid reasons, and you're like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I would encourage anyone here, by the way, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, if you're following politics and things like this, just run some of your perceptions and your questions through some of these chatbots. You don't take it with a grain of salt. It's not the be all end all, but see if you can learn, if it helps you. And then if you can, corroborate stuff if it's important. Don't just take its word for it. It can be a very positive experience. It tends to calm you down and you have your faith in humanity again. Okay, where did I leave off here? So I think a couple people are talking to each other. Cyber attack. Oh, I like GPT not for business. Okay. It helps me establish a daily routine, easy stuff. Yeah, I felt that like some of its untapped potential for a lot of people is these kind of questions. Now, what I've done on my channel, okay, is like you guys, if you've watched any of my live streams, you've seen me do this, where I use the audio feature. This is basic stuff, but Okay, so how many people out there are debating the trustworthiness of ChatGPT in a changing environment where ChatGPT is going after enterprise customers as opposed to consumer customers, and in the changing face of politics and security issues and global financial markets? How's that for a long, convoluted, random question? It's BS, of course, but I'm trying to just illustrate the fact that you can ask it more complicated questions than you could in, like, say, a Google search. That's what a lot of people, still don't realize. It's like you don't just use these chatbots to get like answers on, can you find me the cheapest place in my city to buy milk? You can ask like very convoluted, very lengthy philosophical questions, and this thing can handle it, and it can do a damn good job. It's got no ego, so there's a lot of value here, Now I asked it a total BS question. I don't even remember what I asked it. I asked it this, so it's going into, it's giving you some statistics. It's giving you the, the links to where it's getting that stuff. It's running over concepts. And then, if anything it says sounds kind of fishy, you can dive into that and see what that's all about, right? So very useful tool. A lot of people, from everyday users to CISOs to regulators, are actively negotiating how much to trust ChatGPT. So, like, you can get into this stuff. Ooh, we got some links. So yeah, very useful tool, not just for very basic one-line queries. You can have an entire philosophical argument with it and then see what it says. And it's incredibly good at synthesizing and articulating your thoughts in a very compact and, logical manner, cleaning it up, and then responding to it. So a lot of value there, and it's not particular to ChatGPT. There are many chatbots that can do this kind of thing. Let's see here. It helps me establish. I stopped listening to politics as often. Yeah, smart person. If you listen to too much of that stuff, you can go insane. And then your brain blows up. It's a scientific fact. And you can get the receipts on that. That's so cool. I like talking psychology with it too. Yeah, there you go. Like any kind of interesting topic, you can really explore it with this. It's an incredible learning tool. Doesn't mean that it's always pinpoint accurate. No, it sometimes makes mistakes. But for anything like really important, corroborate it. Like verify it from another credible source. Mr. Shadow Truth says, in Asian countries, we see a lot more usage and creation of AI girlfriends. Oh, here we go. What would the value of this market in the West look like? What possible future markets for AI do you see as a possibility? Wow. Well, I mean, I don't understand that. Like a girlfriend that's created by AI. You mean like a robot, or are you talking about just like it exists on a computer talking to you and showing you pictures or whatever? I don't understand. I'm an old dude, so some of these things I'm just really not an authority on. As you could probably guess by looking at me, you can tell by my hair that I don't know anything about AI girlfriends. But it's interesting to learn about this stuff with you here. It will challenge you on your beliefs and opinions if you ask it to. Yeah, that's just what I need. Actually, what I've learned about in my experience with ChatGPT, I haven't really used Grok and Gemini and the others as much. So I know a bit more about ChatGPT, but it's obviously programmed to be very agreeable, and it's obviously programmed to get you to keep talking to it, right? That's pretty self-evident, but it's interesting because you can tell it like, okay, take the gloves off and let's really debate, let's really spar on this. And it can turn into this like really nasty thing that's absolutely intransigent and, just eviscerate, your everything you say, and like point out exactly where you're wrong in no uncertain terms. And, I found it actually, it sort of overshoots the mark. It gets to the point where it's talking past you and it's not fun and it's not educational really, so you can set the sort of sweet spot. Like don't just agree with me for agreement's sake, push back, but don't like push back so hard that you're a raging jackass. I don't need that. But no, it's good. You can go, if you're talking about politics, you can go and talk about politics with it and stress test some stuff. If you say, do you think this is going to happen? And it will say, well, no, I don't think it's going to happen. I think most people figure it's a almost 0% chance that's going to happen. And then you can stress test. You can say, well, what's your reasoning? Like, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with this premise. You seem to be assuming this. I challenge that. I say this. And then, you can have these kinds of, it's actually very educational, very enlightening. I'm not saying it's always perfect, but it's a useful thing. It's great being able to do that without someone who has an ego. You know what I mean? And it interprets dreams for me. Okay, that's interesting. That's kind of like some level 9 type stuff. Call me Glitter. I hope people are smarter than to use those AI girlfriend apps. Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't comment on that stuff. What is Grok? Grok is Twitter's, like Twitter X, everybody's best friend, Elon Musk, right? His version of ChatGPT. It's the generative AI chatbot for Twitter X, right? Mr. Shadow True says, those are cases for both, especially in Japan. Ah, well, don't get me started on the Japanese. If anybody's going to have an AI girlfriend, I would not be surprised to learn that the Japanese are leading the charge on that one. With Hyundai, I always thought, instead of saying Hyundai, you should say it Hyundai. I thought that would be, just give it a little kick, you know. With Hyundai now developing humanoid robots, many people are developing humanoid robots. There's still They're still very far off, though. Like real, you know, cheap, affordable, fully, you know, like you would expect, like you would want. It can do anything a person can do, you know, stuff like that. Like it can build you a fence, it could build you a house, it could, you know, whatever you'd want a robot to do. Go up and fix my roof, you know, what, you know, that kind of thing. Play with my children, you know, that kind of thing. A lot of people are building those. You see them at all the consumer electronics shows around the world. There have been talks with Japanese AI companies that are in the AI girlfriend market. I'm sure there are, yeah. And I'm sure they're going to be the shining light that'll point our way into the future. This wonderful, shining future that, you know, we can all envision. To cooperate further, which is AI girlfriend market, to cooperate further, which is weird in my opinion. I doubt that it's going to help Japan or South Korea with their population crisis. Yeah, you can see how this opens up into all kinds of different colorful topics. Could you show how AI works in terms of ATS systems, or how it knows whether a job candidate is strong or not? Well, let me put something to you. When people figure out finally what makes a candidate strong or not, then the AI will probably be able to figure that out too. But right now, humans can't even spot talent. You know, so what chance does AI have? You know what I mean? Like what they're doing is they're using AI, when it comes to ATS systems, they're using AI as essentially something to automate what they would do anyway. Like, you know, how they reason, how they think. And everything that I've seen, like I don't pretend to be an expert because I'm not a recruiter and I'm not like currently working right now with ATS systems and seeing what their very latest capabilities are. But what I have seen is it's just like a very dumb sort of automation of their basic thinking processes. Like, for example, it's looking for basic things like certain keywords. It's looking for certain key phrases, things related to the requirements for the job, things that are unstated but are generally accepted to be good traits and good things that would help you in that job. If you want to know what those are, you know, you could do very basic stuff like this. You could go to ChatGPT. Okay, so if I wanted to get a project manager job, what skills, traits, experiences, and education would be good, would show me to be a good candidate for that role, but yet those things would probably not be mentioned in a job posting. What are those things? Okay, so like this kind of thing. Okay, let's see what it says. I mean, just once again, like just example off the top of my head, but okay, good project managers don't provide status updates. They translate chaos into decisions, taking value, executive input, blah, blah, blah. Okay, managing risk narratives, not just timelines. Every project has risks. Good project managers control the story around them. Unwritten skill, raising risks early without triggering panic. Okay, so is there a part where it actually tells you what it would appear? Political awareness without politics. Anyway, I was hoping for something a bit more compact, but you get the idea. That might be stuff that if you're in an ATS system and it's scanning applications like resumes and cover letters for trying to filter the candidates for a project manager role, it might be looking for some of that stuff. Okay, like that's the kind of thing that they're using it for. Okay, it's still pretty dumb, really. It's just that it's very, very good at parsing language and parsing the meanings behind language. If you say, okay, I don't want anyone that's worked in this industry. I don't want anyone, that's got an uncredited degree. I don't want anyone that's, like that kind of stuff. It can then also follow those rules. It's so simple to program it because you just talk to it, like in some cases. So that's the kind of thing they're using AI for in ATS systems, the more sophisticated ones. A lot of them are still pretty dumb. They're just basically operating at 20 years ago looking for keywords and key phrases. That's it. As my Post-it notes start falling down. I usually don't use Post-it notes, but when I do, they fall down. Okay, so we got off the topic of Japanese AI girlfriends. Now we're on ATS systems. Okay, so Call Me Glitter says, and why do we need to make human robots? They don't have anything else to do with their time. A coloring book? Well, we could make humanoid robots to complete coloring books, and not go outside the lines. That's what I'm waiting for. That's what you do when you're rich. You just buy an entire family of AI robots and have them play before you, I guess. I don't know. As you sit and admire them, like the stuff Tesla's doing, it's like they've got their robots shine, right? It almost looks like a car that's been waxed, That's very important too. Anyway, I'm going to wind this down pretty soon. If anyone has any questions that are like super important, like the ones we've been covering, let me know. Speak now or forever hold your peace. I will be back actually in 40 minutes from now. I have a live stream scheduled where we're going to be talking about job search and careers, that kind of stuff, job interviews, resumes, etc. So if you have questions about that, come back then, and we can certainly do it. In the meantime, check out my courses. I already showed you guys a couple of things here. Check out this, the $100 MBA to learn business. Best bang for the buck around and extremely flexible. And if you want to brush up on your communication skills, check out this. This teaches advanced communication skills. Yes, it's about writing, but it's more about what to say and make a great impression. This will help you get promoted in corporate environments, things like that. So check those out. Links in the description box below this live stream. Check out my other channels. I've got 2 other channels. The Company's Expert 2, mainly for job seekers, just more information. And the Company's Expert 3, this is more for business and entrepreneurial stuff. So some of you guys might, be interested in that kind of stuff. So check out those channels, subscribe to them, and if that's the kind of thing you're into. Call Me Glitter says, can you explain why after I recorded a video interview for State Farm, answering their questions and sent it in, I got an email saying they chose not to go with me, never heard what I did wrong. Hope that makes sense. Here's the deal. In a nutshell, you will never hear what you did wrong. There are many reasons for that. Not least of which is a lot of companies have HR policies where they can't tell you their reasoning for why you were rejected, right? Now, you sent in a video, it's because that's the next step in hiring workers. They want you to send in videos of yourself because that's even more efficient for them. Not only do they not have to go to a physical job interview like you can with a Zoom call, but the next step is they don't even have to sit for the entire Zoom call. They can just watch one of your videos. If they don't like it, that's where the first impression is. They can just reject you. They don't have to watch another video. Or, better yet, get the AI to watch the video, synthesize your, what do you call it? Transcribe your answer. Look at your face, make determinations about, like, are you nervous or, whatever. And then reject you automatically. That's what they're trying to do. That's the next step they're trying to pull. And they'll be able to get there as long as people are sheep, which usually they are. workers especially. They don't rebel against this stuff because everybody wants the job. So, the thing is, if everybody knew that most jobs were in the hidden job market, they wouldn't be doing any of this stuff. That's kind of a bit of a crusade I'm on this channel to inform people of that. But that's what's going on there. So call me glitter. There are a lot better ways of getting a job than doing this kind of stuff. And the desirable jobs, usually you don't have to go through stuff like this to get those. So learn all you can about that stuff. That's all I'll say. And it'll be to your advantage. And Call Me Glitter says, thank you for taking the time to explain. You're absolutely welcome. Last question of this chat says, somebody says, thanks for answering my question. I've seen services that charge people to use their AI to apply to jobs for them. Do you think there is a profit in that? There might be one temporarily for like a limited time because most people are not using those tools. So if you're one of the few people that is, and assuming that the tool is actually effective, it might give you an edge, right? If you're applying for jobs in the posted job market, which are usually the crappy ones. So it may give you an edge. But as we go into the future, more and more people are using AI, so it'll be less and less effective, right? So that's my take on that. I would not recommend it. I would not go down that path. I would rather have people check out the hidden job market. That's where 80% of the jobs are. All the jobs you're seeing posted, that's only 20% of the jobs that are out there. And as always, don't take my word for any of this. Go and look it up yourself. Do your own research. Find this out for yourself. And then, it's kind of very easy leap of logic to then say, I want to go after where 80% of the jobs are, not where 20% are. So there you go. Okay. Thanks, everyone. You guys are awesome. This was one of the funner one of these I did. Take care of yourselves. I'll be back in 40 minutes on this channel. And if I don't see you, have a great weekend. Take care.